again, everybody. It is time for the Silver Bullets podcast. I am Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, we are in our off season now, and it's been a couple weeks since you and I have convened, and there's been quite a bit of news on the Ohio State front. We have, as we mentioned before we signed off our last episode, we wanted to come back and talk about the people that were staying and leaving, and the early enrollees, and lo and behold, coaching stuff as well. So we've got a lot of news to get to since you and I last spoke. And let's start off in the National Football League, as kind of surprising to me, but I guess maybe not a shock, is that Urban Meyer has decided to take that Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching position and come out of his second medically induced retirement. And you and I talked about the possibility of this happening before. We talked about the fact that the things that were going on with Urban's health are not likely to have dissipated, and it will be up to him to manage stress levels in order to stay healthy and have some longevity in this job, or whatever longevity he's going to have in any job. But I guess the good thing for him is he won't have to recruit. He can just coach, and he doesn't have to worry about being perfect and going undefeated or even having one loss. He can probably be okay with 5 or 6 losses most years. And, I think it's something that if you're a head coach in football, you want to test yourself at some point on the NFL level.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Congratulations to Coach Meyer and his family. Obviously, this is a decision that was certainly well thought out, and I can only speculate had the full support of Coach Meyer's wife and children, because, as we all know, as you said, his medically induced retirements were very much on everyone's mind, and I can only believe that he did his research, everything that I've read. It seems ideal in the sense that, as you noted, that there is no recruiting. It's just purely coaching, that it's okay if he loses a few games, the possibility of making the playoffs. I'll get back to that. I'll circle back to that in a moment. So if there's anything that I'm concerned about, is that first and foremost, the stress that he displayed when he did lose. And in the National Football League, we all know that unless you were the 1972 Miami Dolphins, that's going to happen, and it's going to happen frequently. And yes, you don't have to recruit, but I think the whole approach of the way Urban Meyer coached at the college level, at the pro level, is going to have to change. When you're talking about grown men who are making millions of dollars. I know that Urban is being well compensated, but it's more realistic that a lot of the players on the roster are making even more than he is. So I'm going to be anxious to see how he approaches the off season with free agency, with the draft. Everyone's pure strong speculation is that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the selection. I will be surprised, as much of a Justin Fields fan as I am. I will be surprised if Trevor Lawrence is not the pick. I think there's so much pressure on Jacksonville for Trevor Lawrence to be the pick. But I will be watching from a distance, hoping for the best, that Urban Meyer has readjusted his approach and is not going to be hands on his knees, bent over in pain at the first miscue or loss of the season for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2021.
Yeah, exactly. You want to see him stay healthy. I know that when Urban Meyer came out of his first retirement and took over at Ohio State, there were a lot of hard feelings among Florida Gators fans, and I'm not getting the sense that there is the same animosity toward Urban from Ohio State fans. Certainly, I had no problem with this. When he retired the second time there, it was kind of like, okay, well, I could see a situation where he gets the bug again. He's feeling good. He's been a few years. Maybe he's kind of gotten, thinks maybe he's got a better way to handle the stress and that kind of thing. And it's entirely possible and plausible that he would coach again somewhere. And so I was prepared for that going in. And I have no animosity. I haven't seen a lot of these Urban Liar, hashtags like we saw out of Florida when he came out of retirement to coach at Ohio State.
Precisely. And I think the animosity probably would have been there had a rating of the Ohio State staff and or support staff had taken place. And by support staff, first and foremost, Mickey Marotti, that was, I always thought would have been target number one. Mark Pantoni would be target number two. And as soon as it came out on social media that Urban Meyer, even before meeting with the media to announce his decision that he had accepted the job, that no, there was not going to be any staff members from Ohio State. Now granted, Ryan Stamper has joined, Anthony Schlegel has joined, but I don't look at, and this is not meant with disrespect towards either of those gentlemen, as the same feelings of animosity that would have been there had it been, Coach Mick or Mark Pantoni, because how critical they are to the ongoing success of Ohio State football.
Right. They're we're not, I don't think it's saying anything negative about the guys that Urban Meyer took with him, to say that the ones that he didn't take are foundational pieces and much more difficult to replace. And that you can even go into the coaching staff, fairly deeply in that as well. You can add that on. But, as you said, Urban Meyer loves Ohio State. He grew up an Ohio State fan. He doesn't want to undo the success that he set up the program to have after he left. I mean, he was very instrumental in making sure that the stewardship of the program was in good hands when he left, and to then go back and raid, that legacy, it would have been a bad move. And I think that he was cognizant and aware of that. And I think that he did, he did himself, his reputation a favor, and he also did the Buckeyes a favor by not doing that.
Well, I know that you're a big Miami Dolphins fan, and just speaking for myself, being a Cleveland Browns fan, I obviously the 2021 NFL schedule hasn't come out. I mean, the 2020 NFL season hasn't concluded, with the Super Bowl still to be played. The reason I'm bringing this up is I do know that unless the Jacksonville Jaguars make the playoffs, the Cleveland Browns are not going to be playing Jacksonville in 2021. I'm not sure if you can speak on behalf of Miami, but the point is it's going to be interesting. I do know that I think that Urban Meyer is leaving here with only the best wishes of the Ohio State fan community behind him for continued success. I certainly hope that he's able to turn around Jacksonville. That would just add another chapter to an already illustrious career.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and congratulations to the two fellows that he brought with him, Anthony Schlegel. This is a great opportunity for him. We talked about some of the former Buckeyes and where they, their coaching moves the last show, and this, this is an opportunity for them. So good luck to them. Good luck to Urban Meyer. Not too much luck, because I really can't stand the Jaguars, because I live in Orlando, and that is the closest AFC team, so we get stuck with their games quite a bit. So I have quite a bit of animosity, because I would much rather see the Dolphins, who are just down the road in Miami on a weekly basis, even though they are a very painful team to watch sometimes.
They're getting better. As a Cleveland Browns fan, considering this is the first time that the Cleveland Browns enjoyed the fruits of the NFL postseason in 18 years. That I know that it stung Miami to not make the postseason on the last weekend of the season, but things are looking very promising for Miami, and I think it'll be interesting to see how the Dolphins do going forward.
Yeah, the third offensive coordinator in 3 years, so that'll be fun to see how that goes. And there's a lot of turmoil there. There's a lot of questioning. Should we build around Tua Tagovailoa? Should we package Tua and trade for Deshaun Watson? I mean, it's never a dull moment. And my tagline for the Miami Dolphins, after having watched them my entire life, is the team's just too stupid to win. They just continue to be too stupid to win. But maybe that's turning around. Hopefully it's turning around. We'll see. I believe if the Browns can do it, then it can be done by virtually anybody.
It's a good philosophy to have.
All right. So let us turn our attention now toward the Buckeyes of the present and maybe some of the past, as we talk about the guys who are coming and the guys who are going, or the guys who are staying, I should say, and the guys who are going. And we've had a lot of announcements. They had the deadline where you had to declare for the draft, and a lot of the declarations for the draft very unsurprising. We knew Justin Fields would be going. We knew Wyatt Davis would be going. I think we had a pretty good idea that Shaun Wade would be going, even though maybe he played his way into having to come back for a year. So there were some non-surprises, but of course there were some surprises. There always are, and I think for me, by far the biggest surprise, two biggest surprises for me were both on the offensive side of the ball, with Chris Olave and Thayer Munford announcing they will return to Ohio State.
Certainly, I agree with you. Thayer Munford, we were fortunate, if you were on the insiders of Buckeye Scoop, that we kind of knew that Thayer Munford was going to be coming back. That's just a little teaser for those of you who have not taken the plunge, to find out about Thayer Munford. And then as far as Chris Olave, I completely agree with you that as the deadline approached and there was no announcement from Chris Olave, I just thought, okay, he's just taking his time. And truth be told, I was in the process of actually driving to Ohio State to return my daughter to campus for the second semester and listening to Columbus radio station announcing with great excitement that Chris Olave had decided to return. So a surprise for sure, because all season long, the prognosticators had been saying, in terms of probable late first round draft choice, what a dynamic receiver. So obviously I'm very excited for both players. I think, one of the best aspects of Chris Olave's return that I think Tom Orr and Tony Gerdeman brought up on, one of their respective podcasts. I have to confess, I'm not sure if it was the Morning Scoop or the Buckeye Weekly, but the point that they made is this obviously speaks very highly of Chris Olave's belief that the freshman quarterbacks, who, it doesn't matter if it's CJ Stroud, Jack Miller, I'm gonna stop there with those two, because no disrespect to Kyle McCord, that of the players that he's seen, Stroud and Miller, that he has faith that they will be able to deliver a strong season for him and not impact his 2021 NFL draft stock. 2022 NFL draft stock.
Yeah, it does speak highly of what he thinks of the quarterbacks in the room and the head coach who develops those quarterbacks, because I don't think we've got any indication that Ryan Day can't take a really good recruit, turn him into a really good quarterback. We've seen it now a few times, and even in first year starters, you never can be sure what to expect. But I think the last two first year starters for Ohio State have done remarkably well, to the point where, we talked about this with the Bosas. You have a Bosa, you have another Bosa, you have a Chase Young. You can't expect that every year. And indeed, this was the year we didn't have a Bosa or a Chase Young type player at defensive end. Well, eventually you're not going to have a Dwayne Haskins or a Justin Fields type season at quarterback. I think these recruits have shown just in a very limited amount of snaps that the future is still pretty bright at quarterback.
Future's exceptionally bright at quarterback because, to put it in let's just put it in a different context. Jack Miller, and this is not meant to disparage him. Jack Miller had Ohio State fans when he announced, I believe it was in the summertime when he announced, way before, his senior year that, fans were truly, excited, because he was so highly rated, highly touted. And from what I understand, Jack Miller, it was just rather unfortunate the way that his high school career concluded. It was that he was beset by injuries, but he was still, very highly regarded. With CJ Stroud, it was more of, all right, his senior year, he truly blossomed, which is what led to not only Ohio State, but other programs around the country wanting and seeking him. And Ohio State were just the lucky beneficiaries of, being able to secure his services, at the tail end of his senior year. So I did mention Kyle McCord. What I find interesting is when it comes to Kyle McCord, he truly is, one of these players that Ryan Day had picked, kind of selected, if you will, like that's the guy that I want. So all three of them are going to be in a pitched battle. I think it would be logical to give CJ Stroud if you want the presumed lead, simply because he came in off the bench against Clemson after Justin Fields was hurt. But I know that Ryan Day is going to do everything he possibly can to make it even between CJ Stroud, Jack Miller, and Kyle McCord, who's now on campus as of this weekend.
Yeah, and it should be a great battle because although the two quarterbacks that have been here have a slight head start, it's not as big a head start as you would have had in a normal year because of the weird way that the pandemic affected the spring ball and all of that. So, it's not as lopsided of a playing field as it would normally be. Now, C.J. Stroud was the first off the bench, I think the last two chances that a backup got in. But before that, I believe Jack Miller was the first quarterback between him and C.J. to get on the field this year.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Jack Miller was able to play against Nebraska in the season opener. And C.J. Stroud, as you said, he played sparingly. Now, neither of them, and this is not meant in a bad way, neither Jack Miller nor C.J. Stroud have attempted to pass. It was just one of these things where time was very limited and the game was well in hand. And, C.J. Stroud did have a very impressive touchdown run against Michigan State when he did play. Jack Miller, by the same token, also had a touchdown in the season opener. That is the part that Coach Day said is disconcerting, is you're going into, it doesn't matter who, and I'm saying it with, chuckling, but it really is. I can only imagine, I'm sure the Tums and the antacids are going to be a little more prevalent in Coach Day, as it heads into the season, just kind of, all right, well, are these guys ready for when the season opener kicks off? Because you are going to have a quarterback, no matter who is selected, whoever wins the job, that has never attempted to pass at the collegiate level.
Yeah, it definitely that's got to be a concern. But I think there are opportunities to give these guys passes, and that's why I don't think that this should have been a year where Ryan Day was apologizing for scoring touchdowns late. I think this was a year where, hey, I got to get my players ready, and so I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings, but I got to get these kids on the field, and I got to have them throwing passes. And I think that's the way they should have approached it. I think there's something to be said for having class and not running the score up, but I think you have to go with the circumstances you have. The number of games were limited, the number of blowout games even more limited, and you had opportunities to get these guys in and get them throwing passes. And I understand you not wanting to show anyone up, but I think the coach on the other side once you have that discussion post game, I think they would understand.
I agree. I think, it was unfortunate, looking back at the 2020 season that could have been, and by that, I mean, let's face it, there were, the opportunity for Ohio State, to open up the season against Bowling Green, all right, which it was 2020. Bowling Green may have been if they had played a full season, may have been the worst team in college football. I mean, anyone who saw any MAC opportunities when Bowling Green was on, they were wretched. So that is Exhibit A of, all right, here's where C.J. Stroud and or Jack Miller would have played if it had been a regular season. So getting back to, you're right, it's unfortunate that they did not have the opportunity to really play, just with the complete up and down, uneven nature of the 2020 season that we all experienced. If anything, it's going to make spring football that much more important, because every rep, every opportunity to play and learn and get better is going to have to be seized upon by everyone that's in this competition for the quarterback position.
Yeah, let's circle this conversation back now to the wide receiver position, because we've been kind of on that tangent with the quarterbacks. But the bottom line is, having Chris Olave back does some things for Ohio State. Obviously, two of the best receivers in the country will still be starting for Ohio State. But I think what this season showed us was that maybe that crop of receivers coming up behind them, not quite as ready as the previous year's younger guys. But I think what this does is, with Chris Olave coming back and having Garrett Wilson, is I think it allows you to go back to having that true 6 starters mentality. I think you can get guys in there now that have had a little bit more experience. Jackson Smith and Jigba, a guy like Jamison Williams. I mean, these are guys, Julian Fleming, get on the field more now and contribute more, than they did before. But you can also feel a little more comfortable taking Olave and Wilson off the field.
I agree. I think the wide receivers, I mean, we all know how deep and talented that wide receiver room is. And I think when you look at the return of a player like Chris Olave, obviously Garrett Wilson was coming back. Some people are kind of concerned, does this mean that some of those players behind them are going to want to leave, and enter the transfer portal? Already Ohio State lost Mookie Cooper. He was one of those freshmen who didn't get on the field in 2020, and wish him nothing but the best at Missouri. But getting back to the wide receivers that you mentioned, I think, the mere fact that I think the opportunity is there now for any of those receivers that you mentioned, Fleming, Jackson Smith and Jigba, G. Scott, Emeka Egbuka is one of those true freshmen who are on campus now. Any of them, the opportunity is there to, again, kind of build a solid rotation to help with the maturation process of those quarterbacks that we've been discussing.
Yeah, and you mentioned G. Scott, and he's a guy who didn't really get on the field. But I don't think that any of the guys that did get on the field are going to leave because Chris Olave came back. I think, if you played 8 games this past year, you're going to come back because you're going to get on the field. You're going to get some balls thrown your way. You're going to get opportunities, and all of these guys did. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Julian Fleming, Jamison Williams all got opportunities this year. They'll get more of those opportunities as they earn them. They're going to have to, obviously, they have to block in the running game, and they have to take care of their assignments on the field, and they have to catch the ball when they have their opportunities. And I think that they'll, like I said, I really anticipate a more of a return to a 6-deep look. The one guy that you mentioned him, I think that you might have a concern about entering the portal maybe would be a G. Scott, since he didn't have that opportunity last year. But, I don't think that's a problem based on what Ohio State has coming in. You never want to lose kids, but when you're recruiting at such a ridiculous level as the Ohio State wide receiver position is right now, you're going to lose guys. Like I said, like you pointed out, Mookie Cooper already left for Missouri. But you can handle those losses because the guys you have coming in behind them are amazing.
And speaking of G. Scott, and this is just pure speculation on my part, I wouldn't worry about him as much as I think G. Scott's father. He was one of those people that was just all about everything that Ohio State has to offer. Every interview that I've ever heard with him about the tremendous job that Ohio State did in recruiting his son, the opportunities that Ohio State will present for G. Scott after football. I think, I think you're absolutely correct. I think, like some people look at it like, well, I'm not playing, but I think with how unsettling the whole 2020 season was, I think most players are willing to, okay, I'm going to get my shot. It was just a bad year in terms of games being canceled and just the unevenness of everything. I would be thinking, if I was Ohio State in terms of the transfer portal, I'm not saying that they have to go, but it would certainly make sense to me if they did go, would be players who are older than any of those aforementioned freshmen who haven't seen a lot of playing time. And I'm talking about guys, like Jalen Harris,
right.
you know what I mean? Like, and that's
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he should. I'm saying it would make sense more to me. Like, okay, you see the talent coming up and you haven't seen a lot of playing time already. You may have an opportunity to go somewhere else and capitalize for a year or two that you probably won't at Ohio State.
Yeah, exactly. So Thayer Munford back, you bring back a Chris Olave, that's like getting a 7-star recruit. You bring back a Thayer Munford, you're looking at a 6 or 7-star recruit. Here's a guy, I don't think Munford had conceded a sack maybe until the Alabama game.
And I'm not sure, I'm not doubting you. I'm not sure if that's even, I don't even know if he gave up one against Alabama. I mean, you may be right. I just know that I thought for certain that he was going. I know that he's battled back problems, injuries, and it would make sense to me that, okay, here's an opportunity for me to go and make some money. Maybe I'm not suggesting that Thayer Munford was going to be a first-round draft choice if he came out by any stretch. From what I understand, it just seems like, okay, maybe he still was not 100% healthy this past year, even like you said, very laudable statistics about not giving up a sack. But I think he wants to see one more year what he can do if he's fully healthy and probably elevate his draft stock. And I agree with the star ratings that you're giving out. When you talk about, all right, a true freshman quarterback, no matter who it winds up being, the fact that we're giving you a premier left tackle who doesn't give up sacks, and we're giving you one of the best wide receivers in program history back, it's going to make whoever the quarterback is going to make their job that much better.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right. I don't know for a fact that he gave up a sack against Alabama. I think he gave up a sack against Alabama, but I haven't gone back and researched that. I'm pretty sure that the data I had that he hadn't given up a sack all year came out after the Clemson game. It's an interesting thing for him, though, because usually you wouldn't see a guy say, I'm coming back to prove I can stay healthy and to show what I can do. Usually it's like, I better get out while I can, before I get hurt again. That seems to be the mindset, is that people are afraid they'll get hurt and they don't want to lose that money because you never get that back on the back end. So, they go pro, and it's like, okay, if I'm not a first rounder, if I go to the third round, that's fine. But at least I'll be set and be taken care of. Whereas if I get hurt, I might not go to a fifth or sixth round. And here's a guy who says, you know what, I'm going to come back and prove I can stay healthy and make it through the season, and I'm going to improve my draft stock. So it's ambitious on his part. It's a gamble, and hopefully it works out for the kid. Chip, one thing we didn't talk about when we talked about the surprises on the offensive side is just as big a surprise is Jeremy Ruckert returning.
And that also speaks volumes about, I think, the kind of style of offense that we have to look forward to in 2021, because Luke Farrell, Jeff Hireman, Jake Hausman, beg your pardon. Same initials, different play. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that the depth at tight end is substantially lacking. Jeremy Ruckert, I know Ohio State fans and myself included like to joke about, oh, this is the year that the tight end is going to be featured. Well, in this coming year, when you think about, Ohio State has had Joe Royer on the roster, and he didn't play, to the best of my knowledge, in 2020. They just Sam Hart was a recruit who is now on campus, for 2021. So now you're talking about arguably two freshmen behind Jeremy Ruckert, and Cade Stover has played, but very sparingly, after moving from linebacker to tight end. Jeremy Ruckert, I think this is going to be an opportunity to showcase him. I think, instead of a lot of the multiple tight end sets that we saw with Luke Farrell and Jeremy Ruckert, I think Jeremy Ruckert is going to probably have an opportunity to have the position all to himself. And, I think you're going to see, if anything, more multi-wide receiver sets, and Jeremy Ruckert as the only tight end on the field for the Buckeyes in 2021.
It really is interesting for me for him to come back, because for me, he projects at the next level. I've talked to some folks who kind of do this for a living, and he kind of projects as a Mike Gesicki type at the next level, but a better blocker than Mike Gesicki. As a Dolphins fan, I can tell you Mike Gesicki's blocking leaves a lot to be desired, but he's a really good pass-catching tight end, and I think Ruckert, would have a, as good a career, it would seem, with his skill set, but especially if, you're being asked to catch the ball one-handed, because he's shown that he can do that repeatedly. But it's a big get. Again, it's another 6 or 7 star guy that you got. It's like having a 6 or 7 star recruit come back, and you only get him for 1 year. But what a player to have back, as Jeremy Ruckert will come back and certainly solidify the tight end position. You mentioned Farrell and Hausman, seniors, and then really not a whole lot there. Younger guys. You got a converted guy in Cade Stover and that kind of thing. So. You may be right. We might be seeing more single tight end sets, and I think that also will go back to that 6 deep wide receiver rotation as well. Is if these guys have upped their game and developed and can make the blocks that they need to make, then they'll be on the field more. Therefore, they'll also get more catches, and they'll be happier, and they won't transfer.
Sounds pretty logical to me. But yeah, I definitely think that it was hoped for that Jeremy Ruckert was coming back. I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, I'm surprised that he came back. I was hoping that was the case, but definitely I completely agree with your assessment that it's like getting another, like a 7-star recruit, getting Jeremy Ruckert back in the fold for 1 more year.
And of course, we expected Trey Sermon to be gone, and he is gone. And boy, what a guy who really burned brightly for a very short period of time and will be fondly remembered as a Buckeye for many, many years to come after a very slow start in a very weird and short season. I don't think anybody's going to forget what Trey Sermon brought to the Buckeyes, especially his last couple of games. And it's just so unfortunate the way that his season ended.
Tremendously unfortunate. I thought I saw something on social media that, when the last time that we recorded the podcast, we were speculating, maybe he had broken his collarbone, and, because obviously the injury was severe enough to knock him out of the game. From what I read on social media, I think it was his, and I might have this completely wrong, like maybe the AC joint in his shoulder had been injured. And I'm not a doctor. I couldn't begin to tell you, in terms of how severe that could be. But my only hope is that, with proper rest and rehabilitation, that he'll be ready to there's not going to be a traditional combine, but he'll be ready for any kind of NFL draft preparations that he needs to do to impress the NFL front offices.
Yeah, I think pro days are going to be big this year without the combine. But yeah, that's obviously they thought it was serious. They sent him to the hospital. You don't do that for no reason, in the middle of a football game. So, but Trey will go on to the next level, and we will have that short run of games where he was just amazing. It's as good as anything we've ever seen, and especially we think back to the Zeke Elliott trio of postseason games a few years back on the way to the national championship, and that's kind of what we were seeing from Trey Sermon. And of course, we have no idea if Sermon going out of that game would have allowed Ohio State to punch, to match Alabama punch for punch offensively. Certainly defensively, Ohio State wasn't very good in that game. I think we can all agree on that. But if the offense had been at the level that it had been, anything can happen in a game like that. So while it would have still probably been the same outcome, maybe a much tighter game, and of course we might have seen the shortest amount of games to get to 1,000 yards that I can remember.
Right. I agree with you. I don't think it would have impacted the outcome. Maybe Ohio State would have scored more. I know that we certainly agreed that Chris Olave was shortchanged a touchdown, that for whatever reason. But in all seriousness, I think Ohio State's shortcomings were more on the defensive side of the ball, scheme wise, personnel wise. I think that Alabama would have been tough to stop for any team.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk about the defensive side of the football. Excuse me. When we return, we'll do that right after this. All right, Chip, let's move over to the defensive side of the football. As I mentioned, we thought there was a chance, especially after the way he spoke after the national championship game, that Shaun Wade might be considering returning for another season, but he is not returning. He is going pro. I think he'll still get drafted in, probably not the first round, but I think he'll be maybe a second-round pick. I think there's just a ton of talent there. I think there's there's a high ceiling for him, and I don't think that necessarily playing in the defense he played in this year is indicative of his skill set. And, at the NFL level, if you're looking for a lockdown slot corner, he's kind of hard to beat.
You certainly hit it right on the head when you said in terms of, like the previous season did him no favors. I think I agree with you. I think any chance of being in the first round at the end of April, I think that's not going to happen for Shaun Wade. But the physical talent's there. What he displayed in 2019, he flashed occasionally in 2020. Not as much as any of us would like, but the skill's still there. I just think that the scheme did not, playing. I think he really is better suited to, like you said, as an inside on the slot receiver inside. That's where NFL teams are going to play him, and they might, he might be one of these guys that gets picked in the second or third round, and everyone will be like, I can't believe he fell. And the reality is, it's like, well, maybe he was just playing in a bad scheme and out of position in 2020.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for if you look at starting cornerbacks for Ohio State and where they get drafted. I think that there's going to be some benefit of the doubt there for this past year. I know there were extenuating circumstances, a new defensive coordinator and things like that, a position change. But I think the skills translate, and I think he'll be fine. As we know, NFL scouts are not they're not infallible. I mean, I don't see how you get a Jordan Fuller or a KJ Hill as late in the draft as you do, unless people are just not paying attention to college football. They're going by, oh, what's his measurables? Oh, he doesn't fit the measurables that I have for this player. But just look at the production and just look at the way they play football. And a lot of times you can tell more about a player just from watching games than you can by, how fast is he? What's his shuttle time? I mean, I have yet to see a guy do a shuttle during a game.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many players doing the shuttle either. So I agree that the NFL draft, so often that is the way that scouts, they look for those measurables to justify their selection, when in reality what they should be doing is using the measurables to validate what they see on the field. I mean, let's take Ohio State out of the equation entirely. Arguably the greatest wide receiver in NFL history, Jerry Rice. And a lot of people downgraded Jerry Rice, and I realize we're talking well over 30 years ago. Oh, because he had a slow 40 time. Well, I know you and I have watched a lot of football in our day, and Jerry Rice certainly did not look too slow as he was outrunning people to the end zone on numerous occasions
Yep.
throughout a very productive Hall of Fame career. Emmitt Smith is the same, kind of, you could use him as an example. I mean, there are so many guys. So getting back to Shaun Wade, which is what I do want to talk about. I think Shaun Wade, as I said earlier, I think playing that inside slot receiver is where NFL teams, when they do assess him, that's where they will find the value. And I think some team, like you said, probably on day 2, I don't know about the second round, but maybe third round, is going to find themselves a very good football player who was probably just playing out of position in a scheme that didn't suit his talents.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what the NFL is doing nowadays with their, narrow trips formations and their crossing routes and their rub routes and all of that, it really pays to have a lockdown slot corner, and there's not a lot of really great ones. I mean, you see teams all the time making, especially the really good teams, the Green Bays and the Kansas Cities, when you see those offenses and the way they work. I mean, even in some respects, what the kind of the way that the Saints use Michael Thomas at times. If you have a guy that can cover those types of routes, it's you're going to be in games that even against the better teams. So I think his skills are perfect for what NFL offenses are trying to do these days. And I don't know how much this season will cost him, but if he slips below the second round, probably there's going to be a lot of teams kicking themselves for not taking him. At least with their second round pick, a couple years down the road.
Well, I don't know how active you watch the NFL draft. It's one of those things that I freely admit I camp out, in front of my television, and my weekend is pretty much, like I know a lot of people live for the first round. I actually, to me, it's more Friday and Saturday, simply because, you get beyond the quote unquote marquee names. And this is where, if you are really good at your job as a scout or a general manager, that okay, where to find the quality. And so this is where, it's like, especially, when, some of the examples that you rattled off earlier, like Jordan Fuller, KJ Hill, as the days progress and you're watching these other guys get picked and you're thinking, how is this possible when you saw the production out of both of those players? And then, when you start hearing as training camp and preseason, like I shouldn't say preseason, but training camp and the regular season started, and you started hearing, oh, wow, like KJ Hill, I can't believe he fell, and I can't believe Jordan Fuller lasted as long as he did. And that's what I'm saying is I think, watching the draft on Friday night or Saturday, like I do, this is going to be interesting to see which team capitalizes on Shaun Wade.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the whole thing. I mean, you probably saw me on Twitter last year complaining that nobody had taken KJ Hill yet, and saying that, someday people are going to be like, oh, wow, KJ Hill, he was just this late round pick and nobody thought much of him. What a wonderful story. And really, it's not the wonderful story of KJ Hill making good on being a low draft pick. It's an indictment of the scouting system.
Like I said, I think a lot of scouts, they look for those measurables when anyone, I know that we talked about, Jerry Rice and Emmitt Smith, but there are some guys that, when you start looking for, purely, like by a stopwatch or by tape measurement, for height and weight and et cetera, I think, you're doing let's face it, your favorite player, I know he's mine, Chris Spielman was not good on the measurables, and look at the career that he had. That's probably like one of the best examples in NFL scouting mistakes. Like when you think about the guy who was picked number 1 overall, okay, Andre Bruce was the number 1 draft choice in 1988. And you want to talk about a classic bust, like if I'm not suggesting that Chris Spielman should have been the number 1 draft choice in 1988, but when you compare the NFL careers of Andre Bruce, who played outside linebacker, defensive end, he's going to be kind of like a Lawrence Taylor type. And, after a few years, Atlanta, gave up on him. I think they traded him. I don't know. It could have been for a 6-pack. It might not even been cold. Chris Spielman, you look at the career that guy had, which unfortunately was cut short due to injury. But let's face it, Chris Spielman, is the kind of guy that embarrasses NFL scouts, that they have to walk sheepishly into their owners' offices and say, how could we possibly not draft this guy? I think Spielman's notorious for saying, well, I was the 29th pick. Like he doesn't like to say, because I was back when the first round had only 28 selections.
Yeah.
But my point being is that teams make mistakes all the time by focusing on those measurables far, far too much when it comes to NFL draft evaluations.
Yeah, my team that year, when they announced their pick at 16, they said linebacker out of Ohio State, and I started jumping up and down, and then they said Eric Kumaro. And then I was like, yeah, he could be good. And
he had all those measurables we're talking about.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and he was good. He was good in college. Had some sacks. You could understand why they would take him, and still, I was excited because I thought we were taking Spielman. That was not the case, and look at the two careers, and you tell me which one was better.
That's true, but think of it this way. If the Miami Dolphins had not selected Eric Kumaro, then John Bosa would never have met Eric Kumaro's sister, and we never would have had the Bosa brothers. So you gotta find the positive in every situation.
Yeah, I will give you that. I'd rather had a couple Super Bowls, but maybe selfishly, but it's okay. It's okay. It's an old wound. The scar is still there, but it's healed. Let us continue with the defense, because as we go down the list of who's leaving, we talked about Shaun Wade. The linebacking core is all gone. Everybody's gone from the linebacking core. Baron Browning, Tuf Borland, Pete Werner, and Justin Hilliard all going to be moving on. And I know some people are going to be happy about that, but I'm really going to miss Justin Hilliard. I think the team is going to really miss Pete Werner. I think the running defense is going to miss Tuf Borland more than people think. But hopefully these younger guys can fill in and develop and be good players and step into the spotlight. It's a little rough to replace all of your linebackers at the same time, but Ohio State is faced with that. And protecting those linebackers is the job of the defensive line. And as you know, Tommy Togiyai has declared for the draft, which is, we knew it was a possibility, but man, we were hoping to get him back, because there's not a like-for-like nose tackle with Tommy Togiyai, because when you get a nose tackle of his ability, It's just like having a Bosa at defensive end. I mean, those just don't come along all the time. I mean, he's not only occupying multiple blockers, Chip, but also he's changing where the line of scrimmage is. He's resetting the line of scrimmage a yard or two back. It's not only keeps his linebackers clean to make plays, but it enables him to get in and force quarterbacks into uncomfortable positions where they need to now scramble toward one of the defensive ends. So losing him is big, but just as big as losing him is getting Haskell Garrett back.
Yeah, you want to talk about surprise. I mean, Haskell Garrett coming back, especially after everything that he went through in the offseason that we're all familiar with. Like I really thought, when the rumors were that after Ohio State, in terms of like there were rumors that, okay, Ohio State defeated Clemson. Hey, like Haskell Garrett may be back for another year. And just, I mean, between you, me, and our audience, whenever a player says, well, I'm thinking about it, I think that I don't hold it against the player. I think that kind of is a politically correct way of just saying, like, I don't want to say that I'm leaving. And so I genuinely thought he was gone. I did not give it, too much. I did not put too much stock again until the vaunted insider, that we have on Buckeye Scoop kind of letting us know, it's not a secret anymore now. It's the kind of thing that, now that it's common knowledge. But if you were on the insiders, we were aware that he was coming back. Getting back to Togiyai, that one was not a surprise, but a disappointment, I would say. I really thought that Tommy Togiyai would maybe give it another shot, especially like if he thought, okay, well, Haskell Garrett's coming back. You can't begrudge any young man, an opportunity at what financially could be, quite lucrative, so I think Tommy Togiyai is going to be, we were just talking about Shaun Wade. I think he's going to definitely be one of those guys on day two, early, that's going to be selected and make some NFL team very, very happy.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, nose tackles don't get the big accolades the way defensive ends do, but I mean, he's every bit as good at his position as a Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa at defensive end. So, good luck to him. The defensive line will have Haskell Garrett back. They'll just have to replace Togiyai, which is easier said than done, but they will be getting some guys back. Antoine Jackson and Jerron Cage are back, right?
Yes, both players announced that they are coming back, so that should lend itself to a very interesting spring as well as preseason camp. Who gets to, in terms of being a starter. I mean, Antoine Jackson had a lot of recruiting hype. I mean, originally signed with Auburn and then, went to a junior college and then transferred to Ohio State. So far the recruiting hype has not really lived up to, the on-field production, I should say, has not really lived up to the recruiting hype. So he has another opportunity to improve. I think Jerron Cage, again, I think he gave a very solid effort, but there was a reason why Tommy Togiyai, as you said, was the starter and Jerron Cage was not. So this offseason, I think, will be critical for Cage. And let's face it, I mean, the spring, is going to be an opportunity for, maybe other players along the defensive line to emerge and seize the opportunity that presents itself, with the vacancy at that nose tackle position that we're discussing.
Yeah, hopefully there'll be some development there. How we doing at defensive end? We know Zach Harrison was a sophomore. He should be back. And then there's, of course, Tyreke Smith and Tyler Friday. How we doing on the defensive end side, Chip?
Well, Tyreke Smith thankfully decided to come back. When you lose, Jonathan Cooper, who, he was another player who was starting to really kind of turn up his game, as the march towards the postseason was coming into play. He, again, I think, played as well as he possibly could. I'm happy to see that, granted that it didn't culminate in a national championship, but for a guy who sat out, 2019, with the exception of the Michigan game, Jonathan Cooper, for him to be able to be a contributor as much as he was at the defensive end position, it was very impressive and heartening to see. Zach Harrison, Tyler Friday, Tyreke Smith, like all of them have tremendous opportunities at defensive end to kind of take on that leadership role. As you said, we were missing, that dominant defensive end pressure that we've grown so accustomed to, like the Bosas, I think, Chase Young, so here's an opportunity for anyone that's playing at that defensive end position, to seize a starting role and run with it.
Exactly. All right, Chip, the kids are on campus. 15 early enrollees this year. Chip, is that a record?
It has to be. I mean, I think back to, and again, dating ourselves, Michael, I remember, like a very precocious young man by the name of Maurice Claret kind of being like a trailblazer, and as the years have gone by, since that magical year, 18 years ago, I guess now 19 years ago, since we're now in 2021, that, you get to see more and more players, but 15 is, considering, I think I don't have it directly in front of me. I want to say that Ohio State signed 21 guys in December, and, to only have 6 players who aren't on camp. It's amazing that 15 young men have decided, all right, yeah, I'm going to give up my last semester of high school and enroll early and, try and get a jump start on their collegiate career. I'm really excited to see, this talent. Granted, probably not going to be able to see it in person in Ohio Stadium, but to hear about their exploits during the winter workouts and spring football.
Yeah, it's always good to get reports on the kids in the sport. This sport is interesting that you bring guys in the year before they come in and they get acquainted, and those guys are always a leg up on the ones that don't show up till summer. Just being in the program and being in the weight program, being in the facility, learning from the guys, getting the coaching. It's a big step forward. Being around Coach Mick is a big thing for these guys. But so the guys that have already made it to Columbus or onto campus if they were in Columbus, quarterback Kyle Mccord, we talked about him earlier. Running backs Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor. Wide receivers Emeka Egbuka, Jaden Ballard, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Talk about 3 phenomenal wide receiver prospects. Sheesh. It's insane what Brian Hartline's doing. Tight end Sam Hart, you mentioned him earlier. Offensive lineman Ben Christman and Zen Mikowski. Defensive lineman Jack Sawyer and Tyleek Williams. Jack Sawyer is one of those guys who could be the next Bosa. He could.
Certainly.
Linebacker Reed Carrico. Defensive backs Denzel Burke and Jansen Dunn. And Aussie punter, Chip, Jesse Mirko.
Well, Jesse Mirko will certainly be, let's just say, the odds-on favorite to take over for the, always loved but departing Drew Chrisman. Drew he decided, to leave for the NFL or try to make it in the NFL, and wish him all the best. Obviously, punters are not usually selected. If they are selected, it's going to be late. They're usually a free agent signing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Jesse Mirko certainly is, probably, if you're looking at that freshman class, to make that immediate impact, Mirko would be one. He's coming here from Australia, which is always an interesting thing, for Ohio State fans, to see what kind of talent what kind of scouting that Ohio State has taken advantage of, like these Australian punters, so to speak. You mentioned Jack Sawyer. He certainly has the opportunity to come in and, if not necessarily start, to contribute at defensive end, because, as we said a few moments ago, trying to get pressure on the opposing quarterbacks is something that is going to be so critical for Ohio State in 2021.
Yeah, indeed. And, these guys will be under Coach Mick for a while in the winter workouts before spring ball starts, and then the coaches can get their eager little hands on these prospects. So, there's some more coming in, obviously, this summer. But we talked about the defensive end position and losing Jonathan Cooper, and we mentioned Jack Sawyer, and another guy that they're still kind of in on is this JT Tuimoloau.
Yeah, we won't know everything if you listen to the Morning Scoop. The rumor that is working its way around, we haven't heard this from JT Tuimoloau himself, obviously, is that the chances are that he may not sign, not just in February, but through the spring, because hope springs eternal that, maybe the idea of official visits will be reinstated by the NCAA, that he could wait until the spring. And that makes sense. I'm not bad-mouthing the young man. This is, let's face it, it's a critical decision, when you're talking about, where you want to go to college, and especially, for somebody as talented as he is, to play college ball, because that could impact, potentially an NFL career. I think it's going to be interesting to see, you mentioned Coach Marotti. I can't imagine, as I said, I think back to when I was a senior in high school. I can't imagine, how repulsed I would be at the idea of somebody telling me, Chip, you get to wake up every morning before 6 a.m. and you're going to be put through, grueling workouts from a man who's going to scream at you with the tenderness of a Marine Corps drill sergeant, and then you get to go to college classes. My respect and admiration for the maturity that all of these young men, regardless of position that they're taking to better themselves, it's off the charts.
Indeed. Well, it's good to see this many kids on campus early, and I think that will pay dividends down the road. Maybe not in 2021, but certainly 2022, 2023, these kids are going to be ahead of other kids that came into other schools and didn't arrive early. I think that's where it kind of shows up. So, but we'll see how it goes, because every year you just never know what's going to happen. Sometimes the biggest surprises happen, and guys that you kind of seem like throw-ins suddenly emerge, and guys that were very highly recruited, and recruiting wars took place over these guys. Sometimes they don't pan out. So it's part of the ongoing cycle of college football that we love so much, and it will be fun to watch and see how it develops.
As of now, and you feel free to correct me if I'm mistaken, as of now, there have been no official announcements in terms of when spring practice is actually starting. From what I understand, everything that I've read in terms of interviews on Buckeye Scoop is that, we're talking about these freshmen that they are on campus, but they're quarantining themselves this week. And then beginning February 1st, that's when those lovely winter workouts begin. So the speculation is that spring ball will probably begin in March, because, this was something that I had asked Gerd on Buckeye Scoop on one of his chats is, in years past, Urban Meyer and then Ryan Day would stagger spring football. You know what I mean? Like, you would have only a couple practices, to make it go lengthy into April. And the reality is there isn't going to be any spring break at Ohio State in the traditional sense. Students are going to get a couple days off, but they're not going to get a full week off. Students will be home now, hopefully, because, like they have concluded their spring semester exams at Ohio State, unlike last year. But my point being is, we'll see when spring football begins and when that always loved spring football game takes place, if it takes place, hopefully in the middle of April.
Certainly a beloved Minnich family tradition.
It is. Yeah. my children abide my, I don't want to call it a sickness. I'm sure if my kids were to jump on this podcast, that's what they'd call it. But, let's just say my devotion. They abide my devotion to Ohio State football in the spring.
It's the least expensive Ohio State football game of the season.
Easily. It's there's a reason why it's beloved by me. When you have a family and you've got two strapping young boys who, it's either eat or be eaten. It's like taking them to an Ohio State football game could be a very costly endeavor.
Yeah, and you can get seats for these spring games that you can't get for that you can't afford for the regular season. So that's always helpful too.
Exactly.
All right, Chip, we should talk about the coaching staff because, as we mentioned, Urban Meyer did not deplete the coaching staff when he took the Jacksonville job, but yet we still see a pretty major loss on the staff as Greg Madison has retired as the co-Ohio State defensive coordinator, and it's not terribly surprising. He's not the youngest guy, but this is an opportunity to see what Ryan Day will do. Will he turn this defense completely over to Kerry Combs and say, this is your baby, tell me what you need and I'll get it for you? Or does he go and find somebody who is, a disciple of that Pete Carroll style defense, like he's shown a tendency to do in the past? I mean, there's a lot of ways that he can go here. And, you wonder too, after a season like this, do the hard conversations take, any kind of a role in Greg Madison deciding to retire? Do the hard conversations about we need to be better on defense, this is unacceptable?
They could have. I mean, I want to give credit to Greg Madison for coming to Ohio State after such a lengthy, storied career, a significant number of seasons, I might add, assisting that team up north. In two separate tours of duty. I mean, he also coached at Notre Dame. He coached at Florida, which is where he met a young graduate assistant by the name of Ryan Day. So I think, Greg Madison, at his age, he's earned the right to kind of, depart on his own terms. I mean, I think, I have no idea what the future holds for Greg Madison. I presume, at his age, I'm sure that, not having to worry about recruiting, which we talked about earlier with Urban Meyer, certainly had to play a factor. And, you mentioned hard discussions. I think it would be unfair of me to lay the blame squarely at Kerry Combs like a lot of fans did. I think it would also be fair to guess that those difficult decisions about, okay, Kerry, how comfortable are you with the single high safety concept that I prefer? Because, it would be just pure speculation on my part in terms of any names as to, well, who could possibly be in the running. I think nothing against Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson is a master at what he does, because I know that there's been a lot of ideas like, well, just make Larry Johnson the co-defensive coordinator. Well, that's all fine and good, but how does that solve the coverage issues that we all saw? I mean, like, Larry Johnson is a master at pressuring the quarterback. I don't know about, does he, have a working knowledge of, the back end, which is where the problems were. So it's going to be interesting to see who they target, anyone that Ryan Day has worked with previously, if anyone, as you said, like is a disciple of that Pete Carroll school of the single high safety look that Ryan Day prefers.
Chip, I will have you know that Larry Johnson is undefeated as acting Ohio State head coach.
I appreciate the reminder. I would never ever want that. I do know that Larry Johnson, in terms of when he was at Penn State, I believe that he was the defensive coordinator, but again, his forte is along that front seven. You know what I mean? Like the in terms of like coming up with, especially along the defensive line. So, yeah, I think Kerry Combs, it's going to be a challenging off season. We talked about this earlier in the season. I believe that it was a combination of a coach and a coaching staff that was not experienced at coaching a scheme that they were asked to coach, maybe not having the right personnel to execute it. And we were just talking about spring football. I can't emphasize how much that probably impacted a lot of the defensive lapses that we saw. The fact that you didn't have 15 spring practices, then why don't we just throw another log onto the fire and supposedly cancel the season, and then we're going to bring you back, and then we're going to we'll throw some COVID cancellations in too. It's like I think there was a lot that contributed to the poor play of Ohio State's defense. But again, I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of a coach that they bring in to help Kerry Combs and see what kind of scheme that Ohio State's going to play in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, Kerry Combs is a guy who, when he was here before, you never heard any fans complain about him. I mean, very beloved. Went on to the NFL to great success to the point where he parlayed that into a defensive coordinator job with Ohio State. And I don't think that it's because he's a bad coach. I don't think it's because he can't coach the scheme that Ryan Day wants. I think that it's easier for fans to look and say, what's the easiest and simplest explanation? Well, Jeff Hafley left and Kerry Combs came in. So that must be the issue. But that's not the only thing that changed this year. You mentioned the fact that, he didn't get to spend a spring with his new team. Also, calling plays for the first time, it takes some adjustment because you're trying to do more than one thing, and it's a new responsibility. You have to get used to that. I'm not sure you get used to that in a COVID-shortened season with limited preparation time. But then, the biggest part of it is you lose your just about your entire starting defensive backfield to the first round of the NFL draft. And, obviously in Jordan Fuller's case, a lot later in the NFL draft than it should have been. That's a pretty major change. So it's easy to say, oh, the one change must be the problem because these other guys are highly rated recruits. But on the other hand, I think everybody forgets guys come in, they're not necessarily great right away. They become great. Was Damon Arnett as a sophomore the same as Damon Arnett as a senior? No. And it's just not a good thing to expect for a kid to jump into a starting position as a cornerback and to dominate right away, because it just doesn't happen. I mean, even at Ohio State, where guys seemingly every year go in the first round of the draft, the next guy coming in doesn't necessarily come in and lock guys down the first year. So, it's sometimes there are more than one, or there's more than one answer and more than one change that adds to a problem. And we'll see if they get it fixed. I know Ryan Day is going to be committed to fixing this, and I'm sure he's weighing all of his options. I'm sure he'd like to get a younger coach in there, who's really energetic on the recruiting trail. Maybe get the defensive equivalent of what Brian Hartline's been doing. That would be nice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Ryan Day is certainly committed to getting this fixed. What steps that he takes in terms of hiring a coach, I think, it seemed evident to me that this whole season was grueling in so many respects With everything that Ohio State experienced, I think, Ryan Day said, like taking a little break. Now, granted, winter workouts resume in February, so it's not like a huge break, but it'll bear watching to see, which coach Ryan Day hires, like you said, somebody who's well regarded on the recruiting side of things, somebody who is well versed in the single high safety look, any of all of the above. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what direction Ohio State takes, as it relates to this vacancy with the retirement of Greg Madison.
Chip, would the funniest possible solution to this be to just pull Marcus Freeman away from Notre Dame?
I don't know about the funniest. It certainly, I know that it would make a lot of Ohio State fans happy, but again, I don't know if it's necessarily fixing the problem, which is, Marcus Freeman. Again, congratulations to him, for making the move to Notre Dame. Kind of what we talked about previously, that I think this move was made kind of, to position himself for an eventual head coaching opportunity. But Marcus Freeman has never coached a secondary, and that to me is like, I think that's the crux of the issue, is that you need somebody to help Kerry Combs. If you decide single high safety is what you want, then, and Kerry Combs, I think, is adaptable, but he certainly could use some assistance in that regard.
Indeed. Well, we'll see how they handle it. Who knows? By the time the post for this particular podcast shows up on Buckeye Scoop, maybe the announcement will already be made. If you are a person who needs to know the information before anyone else, I would strongly recommend you join the insiders section of our BuckeyeScoop.com, because we've pointed out some of the things that our insiders knew before they were public knowledge. There's things going on all the time in the recruiting world that you learn there first. There'll be you're going to learn the coach, who the new coach will be, there before you hear it anywhere else. If you need to be one of the first people and you need to be in the know, that's a great place to get the scoop. That's why they named it Buckeye Scoop. And, our insiders are pretty good about, pulling that information out and getting it out there on our board, before anybody else has it. I highly recommend it.
Oh, I can't say enough good things about it. I think Tom Orr says it best, like instead of, getting, some bad pizza once or twice in a month, treat yourself to a healthy dose of the Buckeye Scoop, an insider subscription. It's basically the same amount of money that you would spend on, bad pizza for a month. So it's like,
yeah,
you're feeding your mind instead of your waistline. Think of it that way.
Yeah. And you can look like a genius to all your friends. Oh, here's what I think is going to happen. And will have read it on Buckeye Scoop, and they will not have, because they're not insiders. And then you will look really, really smart when it actually happens. And you say, "See, I told you," and you will be a hero amongst your group of friends. But skip the hot and ready. Maybe just grab the crazy bread. Skip the hot and ready pizza a couple times a month, and put it into Buckeye Scoop, and there you go.
And who doesn't want to look like a hero in front of their friends?
And who doesn't want crazy bread? Chip, you got anything else we need to talk about before we get on out of here?
No, I mean, talking all about 2021 just has me that much more anxious for it to get here sooner. I can't wait for as you just said, like the insider, reports about who's excelling during the winter workouts and spring practices, all that kind of stuff. Every day it just gets us closer and closer to when football will be back, and hopefully in person in Ohio Stadium soon.
Yeah, and you're going to get reports in spring ball, like stuff that they don't let the reporters sit and watch. Like like maybe Tom and Tony get to go there and watch a couple workouts, some stretching and whatnot, and then they leave, and then they actually practice. And then these sort of behind-the-scenes nuggets, sometimes you're going to hear which guys are running with the ones, which ones are running with the twos. Who's leading for that position that Tommy Togiyai left vacant. That kind of thing. That's the kind of stuff you're going to get on our insiders board. So I highly recommend it. I know this sounds like a big long ad, but I think we're just really excited about it, and we think, why not? We're actually finding stuff out that way. Some of the stuff we find out. So, and we're enjoying it. So we think that you would as well.
Yeah. I mean, again, we're trying to be heroes to our friends.
Yeah. Instead of just in our own minds. Chip, I think that the Silver Bullets podcast in the past, I mean, I don't think this, I know this. In the past, we have gone dormant in the off season until right around the spring game. And then we've gone dormant again until just a couple weeks before the new season starts. I think with the insiders that we have at our disposal and the news that the 24/7 news cycle with college football, I think there's probably enough information for you and I to get together in the off season this year and do a show every couple of weeks.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, this coming recruiting signing day is going to be understated, but we could certainly, after that, if there are any surprises that come about, for Ohio State. I mean, we mentioned a name earlier. We'll see kind of where things stand after recruiting. Hopefully by then we'll have a new coach on the staff. Yes, certainly we could get together every couple of weeks to talk about what's going on within the Ohio State football program.
And we are, of course, appreciative of our bosses at the Buckeye Scoop for giving us this opportunity to come and join the Buckeye Scoop radio network. Make sure that you check out all of the shows. Chip has already mentioned the Buckeye Weekly Morning Scoop, which is the hybrid of both the Morning Scoop and the Buckeye Weekly. It just seems like the same podcast. It's two different ones. Tom Moore anchors the Morning Scoop, and he's got new guests all the time. Sometimes it's Tony, and that's why it kind of sounds a little bit like Buckeye Weekly, but those guys do a good job on Buckeye Weekly, and they try to give you a different angle on the Morning Scoop. And of course there's the Sloopcast, and there's Banks and the Give and all of that. So tons and tons of stuff to go into recruiting. That's an area that Chip and I we would love to spend more time on it, but we've got lives. And I'm not saying those guys don't have lives, but those guys are getting paid to follow that stuff. We're not. But yeah, you'll find out stuff about where JT Tuimoloau is going to end up, and Rayshawn Davis and guys like that. So that's something that you'll want to keep your eye on. We are very happy to be at Buckeye Scoop, and every 2 weeks they want us to kind of stay active in the off season. So I think that's a good solution. You can look for a new Silver Bullets podcast every 2 weeks. Chip, does that make you happy?
Makes me very happy.
Okay. It will make me happy too. I enjoy talking Buckeye football with you, and to know that we're doing it every couple of weeks regularly in the off season will be a nice addition to the incredibly lengthy time between the end of a college football season and the beginning of the next college football season.
Can't get here soon enough, man.
All right, Chip, where can people find you on the internet?
I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich. Last name is spelled Minnich. And besides this podcast, I'm also a contributor to Athlon Sports. Be on the lookout for an upcoming article about 3 reasons why Ohio State fans should be optimistic about the 2021 season.
All right, good plug. You can find me at Mike36Fan on Twitter. I am the grumpy old Buckeye on the BuckeyeScoop.com. Of course, there's not that much for me to be grumpy about when there's no games, so I probably will be quiet this off season. But if the guys need a little more content, I can't imagine that they will need more content. But if they do, I'm happy to provide it for them. At a very reasonable rate, Chip.
You are if anything, the term reasonable, I think, is definitely applicable here.
very economically friendly to have me write for your site, I think. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Silver Bullets podcast. Chip, it was great talking with you after a couple weeks or 2 weeks off, and now we will begin our bi-weekly coverage of the off season for Ohio State football. And in the meantime, again, check out all those podcasts I mentioned earlier and read the Buckeye Scoop, and we will see you in 2 weeks. So the only thing left to do is what we always do at the end. Go Bucks!
Go Bucks!